Hello, everyone. I'm Tracy Ariely, end-of-life doula and founder of Comforting Closure. Welcome to the show. Today, we're going to talk about the evolving role of cemeteries and their role in our communities. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Gabrielle Gatto, coordinator of public programs from the Greenwood Cemetery. Greenwood has been one of the leaders in reimagining what cemeteries can be, not just resting places for our loved ones, but vibrant parts of the community. It's an example of how historical sites can evolve to meet the needs of the present and the future, and Gabrielle is playing a key role in this transformation. Together, we'll discuss the fascinating history behind the rural cemetery movement. And for those of you that don't know, the rural cemetery movement occurred between the 1830s and 1870s. It was when cemeteries started to move away from our cities to the outskirts of urban areas. And the goal was to create park-like settings where people could enjoy spending time. We'll also talk about Greenwood's approaches to community engagement, green burial practices, and the role technology is playing in honoring our loved ones. So grab your favorite warm drink, get comfortable, and join us as we journey through the past, present, and future of cemeteries. Gabrielle, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I am just in absolute awe of how people in the death care space are finding each other and having these conversations and bringing it to audiences all over. So thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you. Can you start off and tell us about your journey to the Greenwood Cemetery and what you do at Greenwood?
Kind of a funny story, but it's one of my favorite ones to tell. So I had been living in New Orleans for a number of years after I graduated from Loyola University in New Orleans, and I was working at the New Orleans Film Festival. I was in film, and my Uncle Vinny died, and then my Grandma Rose died, and I'm an only child and very painfully Italian, so it was just time to come home. So I get back here and I apply for a job with Rooftop Films, which is this incredible outdoor summer screening series festival. I get the job, and my first night, we screen a film called Exit Music, which is a documentary following the last year of a young man, Ethan's life, at Greenwood Cemetery. And I immediately was just so enchanted by the types of programming they did and just the space itself. So a few years later, I hadn't been working, and and I was bird sitting for my friends in Bushwick. Like, had no idea where I wanted life to lead me, and saw the opening. So grateful. I get the job. Tracy, I start on March 4th, 2020
Mm,
in New York City.
wow.
And boy, oh boy, did we all pivot. Instead of, helping to set up events, I was taking phone calls in the administrative office. I was taking burial orders. I was learning how to take a cremation order. I was picking up phone calls from funeral directors, but also grieving New Yorkers, and constantly just trying to meet people where they were at and find the right language um, to use for folks. So uh, that's kind of what happened. And I just realized while I was taking those phone calls, there was just a lack of death literacy between the practical to the spiritual, right? So we had death education at Greenwood for a while already. Amy Cunningham, who I lovingly refer to as the godmother of death care rehabilitation in Brooklyn. Her and our public programs team had crematory tours and you know, death cafes and things of that nature. And then at the height of things, I just heard how much the community needed more. So they really championed me to be able to get my certificate in thanatology. I became an end-of-life guide, a death doula, and then I just was able to bring more programs. Actually, I'm manager of public programs now at the Greenwood Cemetery, and
Congratulations.
Thank you. And now I'm able to, along with my team, bring 30 death literacy programs to the cemetery every year.
That's wonderful. Now, garden cemeteries like the Greenwood were part of a significant shift in the 19th century, as we said before. Um, and that shift was called the rural cemetery movement. Can you share your thoughts on why the shift occurred?
So the rural cemetery movement, what's so interesting about that is all of a sudden cemeteries, we're taking more of a romantic landscape, right? Instead of being a place that was dark and dreary, all of a sudden it was a place to commune and connect with nature and the natural world, right? So, Greenwood, when we opened our gates in 1838, we were really proud to be part of that rural cemetery movement and to have that type of space, especially in a city that, because of industrialization and technology and the way all of a sudden we were living our lives, the way we, tended to our dead and our dying changed so much as well. But we were able to preserve that feeling of, peace and tranquility, even when you were on, one of your hardest days grieving in the cemetery.
So I know that Greenwood is one, yeah, as you said, one of the first spaces for public to come to rest and to reflect. How do you promote that today?
Oh. Well, first, actually, I'm just gonna backtrack a little bit to the height of the pandemic, just the height of COVID in New York City. That was another one of the shifts, right? The rural cemetery movement, there was a shift in the way we lived and the way we died, and that happened with COVID as well, right? So when New Yorkers were looking for green space and a place for solace and a place to just take a moment, right? They started to come to Greenwood because all of a sudden it was this green space in New York City that was accessible and welcoming to New Yorkers. So I think that was something, especially our volunteer team. I mean, we had 60 volunteers, Tracy, and then at the height of things, our numbers grew to 300 because there were people in the community, and now we have a listserv of over 800, which I'm still always in shock. But these are folks that made sure, in concert with our leadership team, to have the gates open every single day and for it to be a place, because, we're 478 acres. So we have four entrances. That's a lot of extra staff, a lot of extra volunteers. But it was something the community called for and asked for. And I'm so grateful we were able to deliver. But, um, it was because we wanted it to keep being a place for the public to rest and reflect while also being an active cemetery, right? We have people coming in for a date, and we also have people coming in following a hearse for a loved one's memorial service, right? So to be able to hold space for both, I think is really important. And I think that's also why we work so hard and we're so thoughtful with our public programs. We have concerts in the catacombs, we have walking tours and trolley tours. Um, but, it's all rooted in the fact that Greenwood is the final resting place for over 500,000 permanent residents, we lovingly refer to them as, and their story is infused in everything we do.
Do you have lots of acreage, as you said?
Yeah.
How how is there a possibility that you'll ever fill up? I know that's a crazy question, but
Oh, no, it's not. We get that question a lot, Tracy. Well, I'll say this. The incredible thing about Greenwood, and cemeteries across the nation, actually, we're all starting to just really continue to think future forward, is a phrase I like to use, because land is a depleting resource everywhere, right?
Yeah.
But there are these incredible new methods of disposition. I'm in New York, so natural organic reduction or body composting is now legal, and we're starting to think about how does that integrate into the fabric of New York as a whole, right? As a state. Um, at Greenwood, we have all of these new options. That I think is what's really important is we don't ever want to close our gates, right? We wanted to not only be a National Historic Landmark where you could, come attend a program, but we always want it to be a place for memorialization. And what is that going to continue to look like, feel like, sound like, right? Um, so, natural burial. Let's create lots for that. We have over 90 natural burial lots, and some of them include a no marker option. Some of them do include a marker option. We're creating new niche space. That's something that the community as a whole has said they'd like to see more of. So we said, okay, we'll move out of our offices and we're going to create more niche space for folks. And actually, and a reason we're able to do that is we're opening an education and welcome center, a visitor center across the street, which I know we're going to talk about technology, so I'll leave that for that portion of our conversation. But uh, yeah, I just think that there's always a way to memorialize, and we're committed to that.
So I have two other questions that are just curiosity questions for me. So you mentioned the number of people that you are volunteering and this really rise of visitors during the pandemic. Do
Yeah.
you know numbers like how much?
I do. Um, so yeah, I mean, usually Tracy, what's really wonderful is we get about 450,000 visitors a year, but at the height of things, we had over 600,000. So these are some folks that maybe grew up in Brooklyn, but had no idea this was another green space that they were allowed to come through the gates and enjoy and take solace in. So, we feel like that's an added responsibility as well. Like so many more people are utilizing the space for memorialization or just to take a walk. So,
The next curiosity question. When I travel, I visit cemeteries. I just do. Ever since I lived in Chicago, I would go visit beautiful cemeteries in Chicago. Um, I take pictures, but Argentina, the Recoleta Cemetery, Paris, of course. Um,
yeah.
and there are famous people that are buried there. Are there any famous people that are buried at Greenwood?
Oh yes. We have more than I think folks know about. Um, but first, I do just want to say that something that we really want to make sure we highlight as well is just regular New Yorkers, folks that you know, are celebrated and remembered at Greenwood. We have this incredible World War II project. A bunch of our
Mhm.
volunteers and historians work to get biographies, and they're all on our website now. So many folks that are not in our history textbooks but have a mark on history, that's something we all also want to make sure folks know about and learn about. But of course, there are some folks that end up on our trolley tours and walking tours, and many times we say so the story goes, right? So Jean-Michel Basquiat, my personal favorite, Charles Feltman, the inventor of the hot dog. What a gorgeous mausoleum. I cannot believe what hot dog money bought that man in death. That is just an incredible, beautiful mausoleum. Susan Smith McKinney Stewart, the first Black female doctor in New York State. Um, Leonard Bernstein, and countless others. I mean, there are just so many, James Weldon Johnson. What are some of my other favorites? Frank Morgan, The Wizard of Oz, lots of folks. And, I'll take this moment to highlight as well two of our very own, Elaine DeRossi and Eddie Casanova. They worked at the Greenwood Cemetery, and they certainly are famous and very well known in this side of the city.
So Greenwood has deep historical roots that we've just talked about, but it's also incredibly forward thinking, especially in how it engages the community. How do you see the cemetery's role in working with the community?
I see the cemetery and cemeteries across the world being like a true community space in addition to a place for memorialization. I think, through community programs and letting your community and, folks in your neighborhood inform you of what they need and want, resource and or event wise, right? A lot of our visitors are neighbors, so listen to your neighbor. If they need a cup of sugar, make sure you've got one, right? And they're leading what we do. And we're really here to serve them. So I see, especially with this visitor center we're opening, I mean, there's going to be classroom space. Um, Theoretically, you could rent out the greenhouse for your wedding. Right? Like we really wanted it to be this flexible space that not only told our history and just the history of, the rural cemetery movement all the way to building this greenhouse, this visitor center, and then the 478 acres in between and the story that it has. So I think there is I mean, it's dizzying, and sometimes I'm so overwhelmed by it, Tracy, but I think cemeteries, and especially ours, we have a responsibility to the community to make sure that it is a space for resources, a space to collectively grieve, a space to collectively celebrate life, and a bunch of other things in between.
I love how you keep space, you hold space for your community and you take their lead. You walk, for me, when I do grief work with clients, I don't lead them, I walk beside them. Right. And
Yeah.
I love how you do that with the community. You're not leading, you're not doing something for money. You are listening to your community, you're walking alongside them, and you are making sure or trying to help them get what they need. That's really wonderful.
Well, thanks.
Okay. Now, you talked about some of your educational programs and we've spoken about some of your other fun programs. Can you tell us about one or two that have resonated well with your
Yeah.
community?
Okay, I'm so glad we get to answer this question. At the Greenwood Cemetery, we have three different kinds of death education programs. I'm so grateful that we're able to offer super practical, like financial end of life planning, advanced directives, uh, programs about different death practices and rituals from around the world, interactive workshops, which I'd love to take the opportunity to talk about grieving and weaving, which is one of our programs where we knit and crochet, or I personally play with clay. Some folks literally bring a loom. Other folks Mod Podge and collage, sketch. It's really just a night to come together and craft with purpose and to be in community, right? We were only going to do three. We had three themed events for the new year, for letting go, for release, for grief, for, forging ahead. Uh, Valentine's Day, we talked about lost love and relationships. And, after those first few, Tracy, everyone in the group said, okay, it's every month though, right? And we were like, no, we were only doing three. And they're like, no, we want this. And we said, okay, fine, we're doing it once a month now. And it's this great community. We have all these different projects. Like we're knitting hats for patients. We are talking about what it would look like to make something together for an art installation, things of that nature. So yeah, I'm really proud of Grieving and Weaving. Mary Pat Klein, who started out as a volunteer at the height of the pandemic at the cemetery, just became such a beautiful voice to exactly what we're trying to do at Greenwood in our programming department is to listen to the community, foster and cultivate those relationships. And Mary Pat Klein is a perfect example of that. She came from this really rich background in fiber arts, and now she continues to serve our audiences and our attendees that way. And she also has been instrumental in just helping me get ready for all these other programs. So the one other series I'd love to tell you about is our Day in the Life series. We started out with a day in the life of a death doula. We had over 300 people sign up, which was record breaking for a death ed program. Uh, Little anecdote, a day in the life of a mortuary science student we had. So we had folks that had just started the program, were in their second year, or had recently graduated. So it was a bunch of young professionals and standing room only. It was 80 people in our modern chapel. And like I could cry. These parents came up to me after with their 19-year-old son and said, "Oh my goodness, thank you so much. We thought our son was totally wild for having this thought of going to mortuary science school and becoming a funeral director, because that's not our background, right? Death care work is usually for a lot of folks, somehow it was in your sphere before, but this young man, it wasn't in his orbit at all, but he fell in love with the idea of the work and they were like, we wouldn't have felt really comfortable supporting him if we hadn't had access to this program. So really proud of that. And then, a day in the life of a grave digger. I looked around the grounds one day, Tracy, and I'm like, what do these 600,000 people a year that come through the gates see? They see our incredible staff and grounds people and grave diggers and crematory operators in their Greenwood green uniforms. But do they get to talk to them? Do they know what they do? And that was one of my favorites. It was absolutely electric in the room. People were laughing just as much as they were crying, and they got to see why the staff at Greenwood really is a family and how they get to show up for the larger family of everyone in New York City.
I love that concept, a day in the life. I'm swiping it. I just want you to know.
Take it.
So that's wonderful. I know that in another couple months, we're going to be talking about that grieving and weaving because I have a soft spot for fiber arts because I love doing that also. And a FYI, just for you, I know you said you love to work with clay. Dr. Lula Buzz, she's in the UK. She works with
Okay.
clay and it's all about grieving. Her husband passed away. Her work is amazing. You should check out her website. Amazing. So
Will do. I'm like putting it in my notes.
now I know that Greenwood is a leader in green burial practices. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Absolutely. This is something I get to talk about all the time now, which is great. So at Greenwood, we practice natural burial to all, the specifications that we're able to. Everywhere is going to be different, though. I think part of the education behind this too is every cemetery that offers natural or green burial, it's going to maybe look slightly different or just there are different offerings. So, in order to provide myriad ways for folks to memorialize their loved ones, uh, we try and have as many options as possible for green burial because what we've heard from the community is for a lot of folks, what sits best and right is for them just to be in a pine box or to be in a shroud, to not be embalmed, to return to the earth. So we created more options for that. And I think we've always been able to keep up with the best ways to serve our families. I think, if we're talking a little history here, we're also talking about In the 50s, cremation was on the rise, right? Like cremation was the hot new topic, the way we're talking about natural organic reduction or natural burial, or, just cremation being in our vocabulary more now, right? I mean, for many, many people, burial was the only way their family did it for generations and generations. And with a new method of disposition or the rise in popularity of one, the conversation changes, right? Perspectives might change. And exactly that.
Yeah, I know it usually takes a while for new burial practices to really evolve and to really become mainstream. Like you mentioned, the cremation, and I know it became really popular during the 1980s with AIDS, unfortunately. But so people are very married to death care practices. Those are very difficult to change. And I'm really curious with the with green burials and all those options. You talked about terramation or human composting, and if that's going to be a quicker change just because of what's happening with our world right now and how our planet is suffering. So it's really I'm curious to know, are you seeing a really big shift, a quick shift with that?
People are certainly having more conversations and more every day rather than let's table that idea for a while. It is definitely omnipresent. Um, yeah, I think because of where we're at in life and death in this year, 2024, we'll see a lot of the fruits of those conversations. Um, Time is a funny thing though. In the grand scheme, if it's a decade, that's really a blip on the map, right? But I do think because things are able to be offered and we have more options now, that the education behind that will help inform and push forward how we can quickly show up for families in need.
So Greenwood, with your options, what options do you have for families?
So, contrary to popular belief, we do have space left. Not all 470 acres are spoken for. So we do have regular, three grave lots. We do have, like I said earlier, we've created all of this extra space for natural burial in our historic Cedar Dell area. And what's so gorgeous about that, Tracy, is it's this circle. The inner circle, rather, are these stones that predate the cemetery themselves, which is a whole other story as to why. But the next ring is some burials that some of them are 100 years apart, but like the rings of a tree, it ripples out. And you could see how the human story continues. So I think it's the absolutely perfect spot for natural burial because it mimics nature itself, right? Um, Scattering grounds our niches. I think like that's something that I educated my own family about, right? A lot of folks think, oh, if I choose cremation, then mom has to be on the mantelpiece. Not so. Mom could be in the most beautiful building next to a koi pond, at the Greenwood Cemetery, where anyone and everyone can come visit and commune with her, right? And there are a lot of really great things coming in the future that we're constantly thinking about and preparing for.
One thing that it is becoming really popular in California is that not people, but companies are buying uh, forests or parts of forests that are at risk of being developed. And they're actually using that so people can pay for, a part of that, a tree, and they bring in the cremains. And then they have a ritual or a ceremony where they mix it with other things that are actually really good for trees and good for the soil. And that's where they put the cremains. They put their loved ones, and it's really impressive because I know Oren and I visited one, and it felt like we were walking in the forest. There are other
Mhm.
people hiking there. I mean, it was like a hike. So it was really beautiful. But the fact that companies are buying land that's at risk, and this is how they pay for that land after, they have people pay to bury their loved ones. That is, you talk about community based. That is such a wonderful use of the space, and really helping the community.
Yeah, see, these are the things, Tracy, that really excite me about how their minds out there just thinking about disposition and what remains of our remains in these perspective providing fashions. I mean, Greenwood is an arboretum, level 3 arboretum. We have so many trees. And, trees are also sites of memorialization, whether you adopt a tree or choose to use it as a memorial itself. And 186 years ago when we opened our gates, I don't know if our founders were thinking about things that way, right? But I'm so excited by the notion that people across the country are looking at death as a way to serve life, right? And to commune with nature in these ways that help it endure.
So let's talk about technology, because I know that's one of your favorite parts of what you do. And since the pandemic, technology really has been more integrated into how we remember and honor our loved ones. Now, how has Greenwood embraced technology, and how do you see it enhancing the experience for your visitors?
Well, so many ways. I think like through death education, something that always comes up at our programs is also just like to set the scene. It's like 17-year-olds and like all the way through septa, octa,
Mhm.
nonagenarians in the room together, which that I think is one of our coolest things about that brand of programming. I just, realized I looked around and I was like, oh, people are coming with their grandparents to these.
Mm, that's wonderful.
Um, and most recently there was like a mixed age group because a lot of times we'll have a conversation and it's like, hey, let's break off into, who did you not come with? Like you're gonna sit with them and talk and chat about mortality. And this older gentleman said, I think I want a QR code on my grave. And all of the younger people were like, okay, like what's it gonna go to? Like, and he gave me permission to share this, but he said, well, I want a QR code so it could go to, a website and maybe some of my favorite songs. And, I just want people to stand there and tell me what I missed because I died curious. So tell me what I'm missing. And I thought that was just really beautiful. And then we kind of got into the conversation of, okay, so do we trust the technology that we have right now for that to endure? And that's something I think long term we think about in memorialization, which is probably why, you know, it's a gravestone. um, right? But I think what Greenwood and many other cemeteries are embracing is really being thoughtful, really doing our research, really asking what people want to see and how we can weave that into a historic fabric, right? Because just because something is modern and new right now, it will become history soon enough, right? Quicker than we think. So at this new visitor center, this education and welcome center, this classroom space, I think we're going to be able to greet a lot more technology in terms of how you can engage with the stories of our permanent residents, how you can find a grave, how you can memorialize someone through that technology. I mean, we've had lots of art installations that have been born out of technology, but then are able to have people come in and, write their thoughts and feelings, and then they could be projected on the walls. And then all of a sudden, this individual experience, if you choose to share it with the collective, can be seen by everyone that comes.
That interaction, though, with the person who's died, I mean, it gets to the point where you're actually having an interaction with someone who has passed away, who's dead, and that back, it's so interesting. I know in Japan, and I'm sure you've heard this or seen this, that they have the phone booths
Mhm.
that at
The
the
wind
cemetery or
phone.
at the park where people go to call their loved ones and just talk to them. Um, so I think
Know where
it's
mine is, but oh, I actually do. I keep this in my room. Um, because there are so many times I pick up my phone to call my Uncle Vinny, because the neuroscience behind grief is a whole other
yes,
conversation. But sometimes in a state of just sleep deprivation and tiredness and, stirring from the in between, I will like go to call him. And I'm like, oh, I can't do that. But this strange little tool, this like physical object, I will sit in this chair and I will just have a conversation with him, right? So yeah, these wind phones uh are this beautiful way for folks to, I think it's just about, you can do it without all of that, but it's taking the abstract and grounding it in the present
yeah,
and really inviting you, right? You're being invited to do this, and then all of a sudden, this doesn't feel weird. It becomes accessible, it becomes a resource, and it becomes just an actual place that grief is held.
yeah. I'm so curious with AI and how that's going to really change the landscape in death care and being able to communicate. Some of the really the fantasies out there, the sci-fi where you can upload the person's memory and then you could talk to them. I mean, just as from a philosophical perspective, it's really amazing to talk about that. Um,
Right.
but it is really cool, some of the things that will be coming out. Cool and kind of scary, but really interesting.
I think there are some practical benefits though, Tracy, right? I think there are a lot of people out there that don't care to admit this, but have used our good new friend ChatGPT to help write an obituary. I think that's definitely happening. And I think that there is some space for it to be a tool, especially, in cases of like sudden death, right? Where maybe that person didn't get to talk to you about what they'd like heard in their eulogy, and you're so distraught and you're in active grief, and you need a little extra help making sure you got your commas and your periods in the right place. Um, so yeah, I'm interested to see how it um helps us rather than hinders us and doesn't take us too much away from our human side. But I think I think there's going to be some integration in the death care space that's going to feel good and right.
Yeah. It is very interesting. We had Dreamforce here, which is a Salesforce, a huge yearly Salesforce conference. And Mark Benioff got on the stage, who's the CEO of Salesforce, and was talking about how he uses AI as a therapist. And and actually like really talked about it. I mean, he was serious and he gave some examples apparently, but it's just fascinating. Fascinating to me, especially living
Well,
in
for
the Bay
now,
Area.
my therapist is the gravediggers and the crematory operator. They're
Yes, those.
wonderful people to talk to because they are pros at holding space.
Yeah, I just can't see Chat GPT holding space. I just, yeah, but
No.
Um, so, what are some of the challenges that cemeteries are facing today and in the near future that you see, and how do you think that they should respond to those?
I think probably I'll take this opportunity to just talk about the welcomed challenges, right? And I think a lot we've already covered a little bit here today, right? The welcomed challenge of, okay, we are going to run out of land, but we want to continue to be a place for memorialization. So what is that going to look like here at our cemetery, right? Because even though we're fairly large, we have our own, parameters and regulations and rules, and things of that nature, and every space is going to be different. So it's really sitting down with those, both limitations and areas of growth and saying, okay, like what can we do here, right? So I think some of the biggest challenges will just be education, in terms of letting people know what is possible or not possible at that cemetery. Um, some of the challenges might just be integrating these new modes and methods of disposition into the fabric of, what is cemeteries across the nation, a well-oiled machine of burial and cremation. What do these other things look like? I mean, our grave diggers and crematory operators were doing just that for a long time. But now they are welcoming the challenge of learning new skills and having trainings and new skill sets for what is to eventually come in the not so far off future.
Now, Greenwood is often seen as the model for what modern cemeteries can be. You guys are the rock stars of cemeteries.
Well, I
um,
cannot wait to show this to
we know about you
everyone at
guys here
Greenwood.
in California. I mean, it was even before we talked, I have heard about the Greenwood. What advice, if there's one piece of advice that you can give to other cemeteries that want to follow in your footsteps in terms of community engagement and social responsibility, what would that advice be?
Okay, well, if we are rock stars and we're in a band, we want you to come play with us. We want you
Mm.
to come jam with us. We want you to talk to us. Many of us do, which is so, I mean, I am just so lucky to have the job I have because I get to talk to other cemeterians across the nation. And I've helped some folks get death ed programming up and running at their cemetery. They've helped inform me of what I should be developing and curating at Greenwood. So I think it's just talking to each other. And there any cemeterians out there listening, please give us a call. We'd love to be in conversation and in community with you, because we all have this weird, odd job, as last responders. And, we want to continue to do that. We want to respond to not only, what our families need, but respond to what the collective needs in any avenue of death, dying, grief, and loss of all kinds.
That's a wonderful answer. I love that openness. That's amazing. As you think about the future of cemeteries, I know that we spoke about technology and how exciting that is. Are there other things that you're excited about? Things that you see right around the corner, or maybe even further off?
I think what I'm most excited about, Tracy, is just what's next and what we decide to spend our time, energy, and effort on, what we decide as a, death care community, what cemeteries, what funeral directors, what doulas, who am I forgetting? I mean, there are so many people, estate planners and financial, like, there are so many people, hospices. We have a really interesting opportunity here that's very akin to like that multifactorial freakonomics kind of soup, of okay, we're all actually starting to talk. We're all actually really seeing like what's mutually benefiting and what we can do as institutions and companies to serve individuals and groups of people. So I think I'm just most excited about what's going to happen as we continue to have these conversations. And I'm excited probably most for just the cemeteries getting this rebrand as not just a place. I mean, a lot of people, it's the worst day of their lives when they come through our gates. Absolutely. But for them to know that a cemetery can be a place that, when and if you're ready, you can come back for resources. You can, use the space for your bereavement group. You could come listen to music. You could come take a tour and learn about your loved ones' neighbors on the grounds. And commune with them for visitation. I think the cemetery as a whole is going to really just be another spot to gather, to mourn, to remember, to celebrate. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think that's the future. I think that's the bright spot.
I love how you just brought up collaboration also at the beginning of that answer, because I know I've been doing this for about 2 years, only 2 years, and I've seen a big shift with how we collaborate with the funeral homes, and it's really about how we can help our community, our society, how we can educate,
Yeah.
and how we could work together to get that to happen. So there's so much more collaboration within the aging care and the death care and the grief care communities that I didn't experience 2 years ago. So it's really that shift is happening.
Yeah, it's about the synergy of it, right? And I mean, what I love about Greenwood too is like this no like it's not about competition. It's how can we help each other? How can we be in support to each other? I mean, I'm constantly asking I work in the crematory on the weekends and funeral directors come in and I say, what would you want folks to, better understand and know before they come through your doors? And then vice versa. They say, a lot of folks ask questions about this with the cemetery. Can you provide me more info on that, or is there a way we could like better work on this? And again, it's not about competition. It's the funeral director has to be the funeral director, the cemeterian has to be the cemeterian, the hospice doctor is the hospice doctor, the death doula is the death doula. We all have our roles, and we can actually really be on a team, right? And I'm really proud that I get to, be on the cemetery team to weave into that larger team of folks that are doing the work of educating, informing, and serving families.
Thank you. This is the last question. I
Yeah,
know
you
that
really
since
made me live up to my name, Tracy. Oh,
it's a joy. It really is a joy. I love that you're talkative. Um, I know that since I've become an end of life doula, a death doula, that the shift from when I was in technology, um, how much I've changed. I am a different person, a
yeah.
very different person. How has your experience with being part of Greenwood shaped your perspective on life and death?
Yeah. Whew.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
that is
simple
big.
question. A simple
That
question.
is a big question. I mean, I think it's what a paradox. The more you think about death and the more you engage with it and befriend your mortality, all of a sudden you are just leading your life way more thoughtfully than you could have ever imagined. I think that's the biggest perspective providing thing working at the Greenwood Cemetery has given me is, oh my goodness, I am around death every day, and yet I am more full of life than I've ever been.
Yeah,
I think it's the people. I think we know how much grief and how much space, and just we're very aware of where we are every day. Um, but that's why we have a choir group and we have a bowling league and we celebrate together just as much as we grieve and mourn. So yeah, I think that death coming into my life, from 9 to 5 every day, is really helping me to inform and embrace all those other hours in the week.
I agree. Well said. So, Gabrielle, thank you so much for being here today. It was an honor. For those that are listening who want to learn more about Greenwood and its programs, or perhaps even plan a visit, how can they find more information?
Okay, so you're going to want to go to www.green-wood.com. Very important. You got to have the hyphen in there. So green-wood.com. And if you want to go to the death education page, just green-wood.com/death education. Those are all of our programs on death, dying, grief, and loss. But please come and come often, virtually or in person to Greenwood, because we have everything from tours to concerts to if you want a bird at 6 a.m. I don't want to get up that early, but there's an incredible group of people that do, that bring their binoculars every morning and get groovy with the nature. We didn't even talk about how full of life the cemetery is and the flora and the fauna, but there is something for everyone at Greenwood. There's something to learn there every single day.
Do you have a Halloween tour?
So, we don't really engage too much with Halloween itself. And that's, just part of our philosophy. We focus a little bit more on Dia de Muertos, Day of the
Mm,
Dead. We have a community altar every year. So, in lieu of Halloween, we really spend a lot of time working with local artists and vendors for that to be the cornerstone of our fall programming. And that is, very ritual and culture based, and I'm really really looking forward to the installation this year. We invite everyone from the community to come and place an offering on the altar,
mm.
but we also do celebrate our artists and musicians and just the time of the year with Nightfall. This year, Nightfall, the theme is Time Flies, which I think is so apropos. Um, because time does seem to just be catapulting forward. So Nightfall is our yearly program where you get to meander around the cemetery after dark,
Mm.
and drink, be merry, stroll around, and just listen to some really incredible stuff. I mean, we've got rooftop films, which, my former employers, there'll be films projected, beautiful lights. Musicians from Death of Classical, Morbid Anatomy. We have so many great partners. I really just encourage you, green-wood.com, check out Nightfall. Learn about how you could get involved with Dia de Muertos this year. Or yeah, feel free to just reach out to us. If you want to be involved, we want to invite you in to do so.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Uh,
Thank you so much, Tracy.
You're welcome. Folks, today's conversation reminds us that cemeteries are more than just final resting places. They are spaces for the living where history, nature, and community come together. As we've heard from Gabrielle, places like the Greenwood Cemetery are evolving to meet the needs of our modern world while still honoring the past. Whether it's through embracing green burial practices, engaging with the community, or using technology to enhance our connections to those we've lost, cemeteries are more than just sites of mourning. They are living landscapes that remind us that death is part of life's continuum, and in these spaces, we can find solace, reflection, and even inspiration for the future. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please comment below or reach out to me directly. And if you found this conversation to be helpful, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. This is Tracy Ariely from Comforting Closure, wishing you peace and comfort in your journey. Until next time, take care.